Hey folks, it's Ardwulf. Welcome. We have an unboxing video for you today of something that I am probably going to blame Volko Renke for, because he had talked about how much he liked the original version of this game. This is Empires of the Middle Ages. This is the Decision Games version from 2012, is that right? 2004, actually. So this is 16 years old, and I'm not doing the math right now on how old the original SPI version was, but it came out in like 1979 or 1980. This is one of the Decision Games revamps of an SPI Classic that I believe is essentially identical to the SPI Classic. They're not all like that. Sometimes they're totally different games. This is one that I believe to be basically a redux of the original. Now it's in the sort of large 2-inch board game box that Decision Games likes to use more or less at random, as far as I know. This is not an enormous game, I don't think. So you could fit this in a 2-inch box, but it does have cards too. So condition wise, as you can see, we're doing an unboxing of it. So it is in the original shrink wrap. This came from the very fine folks at Enterprise Games. Please check out their website at enterprisegames.com. They have a whole bunch of goodies for fair prices, and this was indeed had at a fair price. I feel like there's a little bit of sun fade on the front, but you know, that's okay. Like I said, the price was more than fair. So let's open her up and see what we get. We got some rattling around inside. Sometimes with Decision, that's a bad sign. That means that some of the components have come loose inside whatever thing they did to it, but not always. I know I've had that happen several times, though. Now, this is not as thick as the current boxes that they're using for this format. So, all right, so we have a lot. Wow, okay. So we have some baggies. This has been sitting in the shrink wrap for 16 years. So the baggies have turned a little bit yellow. That is totally not a big deal, and totally not enough baggies either to reasonably store this thing. All right, so we have more cards than I expected. One of the decks has gotten battered around a little bit, but it looks fine. So we'll take a look at the cards in a minute. I've never played the original, so but it is a game that I've wanted to have for a long time, and now I do, and we're not getting rid of it again. We have let's move these out. We have 4 counter sheets. And it looks like we have 6 sets of player markers. Okay. Which look relatively straightforward. And then we have a 4th counter sheet of more general markers. Interesting. Okay. So these probably represent money, one would presume. Okay, so this counter stock here is pretty typical Decision white core stock from the period. I have heard people say they think this stuff is really thin. I don't really think that's true. I think it's about average. Certainly it isn't abnormally thick or anything like that. So here we have a rule book. There's a couple things going on here. A, more baggies, which we'll just set aside. B, player aids. So we have, let's say that rulebook felt kind of thick. So, which is good. So they're giving you, looks like, are these the same? Okay, no. All right, so we have player aid cards. And we have one-sided card, which is these magnate matrices, and a couple other schism tables, a couple other things. And then we have these 2-sided player aids. Oh, decision. It's a 6-player game. They gave you 3 player aids. They should be at the same address. I could send this back to them. Lame Decision. Lame. The latest Gauss release suffers from this exact problem as well. We'll look at the rule book in a second here, but I want to see the maps. These look like pretty typical, if a bit low density, decision games play aids from the period. They've recently made some very positive steps forward in their layout of play aids and rules. So the maps, who did them? We'll find out when we look at the book. But these are pretty nice maps. These are standard size wargame maps of 22 by 34, something like that. Not incredibly detailed. It's an area game, obviously, but it looks like there's plenty of space in, I believe the original was a single map sheet, and therefore a lot of these spaces must have gotten really, really crowded. This looks like it will not suffer from that particular problem, which is great. So we're going to have to get this to a table at some point before too long. And indeed, none of the spaces look super duper duper small. So that's kind of good. All right. Looks nice, and we have some language codes on that. I'm not sure what that does. That's a fascinating thing, though. All right, so let's take a quick look at the rule book. First edition design credits. Design and research, James Dunnigan. Physical systems and graphics, Redmond Simonson. Development, design, and research by Anthony F. Buccini and Redmond Simonson. Rules editing by Brad Hessel, and then I can't list everybody. Second edition, additional game development by Joe Miranda. Final rules editing by Ty Bamba, and in-house testing by Ty Bamba, Christopher Cummins, Joe Miranda, and Joe Youst. And the new maps were done by Joe Youst, which is what I figured. All right, so what we have here is a 40-page rule book with what looks kind of like a S&T article stuck in the back after page 34. Looks like we also have some scenarios. We have some second edition expansion rules. So it does kind of look like the full game rules with scenarios are in about 32 pages. Very curious to see this yet. So there's 26 pages of rules, not lavishly illustrated. In fact, I'm not 100% sure it's illustrated at all. There are a couple illustrations, but the print's not particularly small. Margins are not particularly large. So it looks like we got everything here. And it does look like a fascinating game, actually. It's the kind of thing that if you're into the new, shiny video game Crusader Kings 3, which just came out, you might enjoy this as well. Okay, so let's see. These look like all the same deck, which may or may not actually be the case. Of course, the old SPI cards for the games that had cards were of pretty dire quality, and that is not something the Decision has particularly suffered from. Nevertheless, these cards are a little sticky, which is okay, a little thick, which is okay. I would probably recommend sleeving these, which does kind of imply that you're going to have an enormous stack of these things sitting by the side of the game. But we have events as well. Year of Plenty, a Year of Famine, Leader Dies Heirless, Recognition of Claim. And they're all there. It looks like they're all coming out of the same deck. There is, for those interested, Decision hasn't redone it. I don't know if they have the rights to do so or not. A sci-fi variant of Empires of the Middle Ages called The Sword and the Stars. Muhammad, Silk Route, Centralization of the State. So a bunch more events and personalities. This looks fairly interesting, I gotta tell you. If it didn't look interesting, I wouldn't have bought it. So I guess the question then becomes, how do we store the cards? I think I have a rubber band here, actually, which is not something I normally have. There are those silicone hair bands that are actually better for game cards than rubber bands are. But a rubber band is what I have right here, so we're going to use that. And the counters, by the way, are half-inch counters and not larger counters. That's a little bit surprising. Then again, it's, you know, it's 1,100 some counters, so, you know, if we didn't get larger counters in a game this big counter-wise, I'm not really surprised by that. So, now that was a box fart right there. All right, Empires of the Middle Ages from Decision Games, a 2004 release, from what looks like a pretty straightforward new edition of an SPI classic, a well-regarded SPI classic, and one of those genius Jim Dunnigan designs, I think, that was well before its time. And this one, unlike some of those, this one has a reputation for actually working and being a good game. So, thanks for watching. Please check out the links in the video description for social media and the merch store and the Patreon and all that stuff. Please like, subscribe, and hit the little bell icon to get notified when new content comes out. I would like to thank you for watching, and until next time, happy wargaming.